We are live. Welcome everyone to ACDE number 193. A bunch of things to talk about today. Lots of updates on the Pectra front. So we went from Devnet 1 to Devnet 2 this week. We can discuss that and the issues we encountered. Then there was the AA 7702 breakout yesterday. We can chat about that. And then there's two engine API related topics, one around the encoding and one around a new endpoint for get Blobs V1. So yeah, let's get through all of that. Then last call, we had the 7212 discussion where we couldn't quite get to like a final decision about whether we wanted to include it in Pectra. And so let's try to wrap this up today. And then if we have time, there's a couple more topics that are a bit less pressing, but less urgent, but we're going over. So Andrew had something around quantum resistance and the implications potentially on the Verkle roadmap. There's a new state expiry proposal. And then, if anyone has updates on 4.4s, we can cover those too. But yes, to kick us off, Perry, do you want to walk through what happened with Devnet 1, what Devnet 2 is, and kind of where we're at around that?
Yeah, so with Devnet 1, we had the launch last week, and we did have a few 7702 tests that were run. We're sort of working with a bunch of people who are working on 7702 to help us get our testing stack up, and that seems to have broke the clients in ways that we were called forking. Because of the forking, it was quite hard to actually figure out which bugs were treated where on Devnet 1. So we decided it was a bit easier to keep 7702 out of the picture for now and relaunch the DevNet and focus on testing the other EIPs. So we had the relaunch on Tuesday. And since then, we've had like a few bugs that have been already caught and fixed and a few more open. So there's a bunch of open threads on the interop channel in case someone's interested. On a high level, there was an Aragon block production issue that's since been fixed. There's still an open Prism issue and an open Reth issue, and both the teams are looking into it. For Grandine, so the network was non-finalizing for a while, and during that time, Grandine seemed to have issues, but now it's fine. So I still need to look into if that was during non-finality or if there was some other reasoning for it. But yeah, those are most of the open topics. So we're back up to relatively healthy percentage. But the idea is to first get all of these bugs sorted out so that we have like a clean baseline, and then we can start testing whatever we want on Pectra.
Awesome, thanks. Any of the client teams want to chime in with more details on their end? Okay. If not, then I guess one thing is it worth trying to spec DevNet 3 today, or do we want to wait another 2 weeks for that? Do we want to try and run DevNet 2 basically as is? I know there's been some changes on the 7702 side, so we can discuss those right after. But then I guess more broadly, would we feel ready in bringing, say, something like EOF in the next DevNet, or do we still need a couple weeks to, to be ready for that?
I think for EOF, a lot of us are focused on the fuzz testing part of it. We got fuzzers working on the various clients, fuzzing differentially the other clients. So I would want to see successful kurtosis asserter before I would propose putting it in the DevNet. So holding off 2 weeks, we could be there. It might work, but I'd feel better seeing it work in kurtosis first.
Okay. So then, we can reopen this thread in 2 weeks, and worst case, if we launch a DevNet before then, we can launch a new one in 2 weeks with EOF. Mario?
Yeah, so I'm still worried about the interactions between EOF and the rest of EIPs because we are still in the process of writing these tests.
Yep.
So yeah, I would like, I mean, generally EOF and 7702. I think that's my main worry. So we're still writing those tests, and I think they are not ready.
Okay, so let's table EOF for another 2 weeks. We can discuss it on the next call, whether we want to bring it in or not. And I think this is kind of a good transition to talk about 7702 some more. So there was a breakout yesterday. Nico led it. I don't know if Nico's on the call, but otherwise, anyone want to give a recap about the conversation there? If not, maybe I can try and summarize it. But my biggest takeaway from listening to it afterwards was that we've seems like we've reached consensus on not having 7702 be like migration, like a full migration to smart accounts. And I know a lot of the potential design changes had to do with enabling that. So yeah, I think keeping the scope of 7702 to like temporary, giving temporary extra functionality to the account seems to be what we've landed on. I'm not sure though in terms of specific specs PRs what that would mean. Is this the currently merged 7702 spec, or whether there's an extra PR we'd want to merge and see as part of the EIP? I have 1+1 from Julian. Is this we keep the EIP as is?
From what I remember from attending, yes, we decided to keep it as is for now. There are some minor discussions that we want to have maybe a little bit later, at the point that EOF has made a decision on what they're going to do with code introspection features, because there was discussions around if we should allow code introspection to the delegated account. To the delegated account, like what happens when you do exit code hash, exit code size, and exit code copy of a delegated account. Currently, as spec, it just delegates those calls to the delegated account, so it returns the hash and the size of the delegated account. As far as I know, not sure if that changed, but yeah, as far as I know, that's how it's spec right now. So there was some discussions around changing that behavior or not. Waiting on decision on the EOF side.
I wasn't aware that was something that was blocking on EOF to decide. But my off-the-cuff thought is whatever the ultimate resolved bytecode is, that's where we apply the EF00 rule and make the decision about the EXC code introspection.
So that if it's delegated to an EOF smart account, then it cannot introspect, but if it's delegated to a non-EOF contract, then it can introspect. Is that correct?
Exactly. If it sees an EOF account, it's still going to think it's nothing more than EF00.
Yeah.
There was discussions last on the chat yesterday that we want to potentially only restrict delegation to EOF accounts. But we still want to go through more devnets on Pectra, probably with EOF, to see if this is actually what we're going to do with 7702, just in case.
By restrict delegation, you mean not allowed EOF accounts to be delegated to?
No, only allow EOF accounts to be delegated to. Contracts, sorry.
That's an interesting idea. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but all of these are like not anything immediate. All of them, as far as I know, or as far as I understood from yesterday meeting, is something to look into at a later stage.
Okay, so I think it makes sense to then move forward with 7702 in like the next DevNet, and then keeping the EOF stuff in mind, basically, and then when we've actually when we've actually shipped the DevNet and whatnot, we can make a decision about potentially tweaking the spec with regards to EOF, and maybe do that after we bring EOF in. One question I do have though, so looking at the DevNet 2 specs, it links the DevNet 2 specs, I'll put them in the chat right here. So the DevNet 2 specs link a relatively old commit of 7702, which is like 2 months old, whereas Light Client merged something like 19 hours ago. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, like should what we have in DevNet 2, I know DevNet 2 is already live, so it doesn't make sense to talk about DevNet 3 actually, but like, is the thing that we want this latest PR that Light Client just merged for 7702? Or do we want the thing from 2 months ago?
So for DevNet 2, we decided two things. We decided to keep the exact spec of DevNet 1 because it's just basically a basic relaunch of DevNet 1. And second is to not proc any 7702 transactions because the spec is going to change. So we felt like there is no need to test an old spec.
And so, okay, so DevNet 3, we have the latest 7702 spec, and just to make sure we're all on the same page here, the spec would be including the PR that was merged 19 hours ago that I just posted in the chat. And no other, or I don't know, minimal other changes to DevNet 2. Like we're not including EOF or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. So we wouldn't include EOF, but we would just bump up whatever spec releases are there besides that.
Okay. Okay, I think this makes sense. So yeah, so I posted the PR in the commit in the chat here, so we can bump DevNet 3 to use that for 7702, and then we'll see if there's other tiny tweaks, but no other major additions. Anything else on that? Okay, and then one other thing that was proposed that might affect DevNet 3. So Felix from the Get team said that we should discuss encoding the EIP 6110 request objects in the engine API using SSZ rather than RLP. I don't know if Felix.
No. Oh. So basically, at the moment, so this came up a couple times during the code review of the 6110 implementation in Geth. So we kind of noticed that basically there's a lot of code now in Geth to specifically serialize the requests, and more specifically, there's only the deposit requests right now. And the deposits, we have to serialize them to the JSON, but we also have to basically be able to decode them from JSON. And it's kind of the same issue we have in other RPC APIs, where we get a JSON object, and then depending on the fields in that object, we have to figure out like what type of object is this, because there can be more than one type of request. And we kind of thought that it's a bit silly to have all this complexity on the API layer when these objects ultimately have to be handled as SSE by the consensus layer. So we thought that maybe it would be wise to just handle them as SSE like all the way. So basically make the execution layer in charge of encoding them as SSE, and then we would just relay them over the engine API as opaque hex encoded blobs, just like we do transactions now. So when it comes to transactions over the engine API, we actually don't encode them as JSON, but we just pass them as a hex blob. And we were suggesting to do the same for these new request objects. The downside to this proposal is just that the execution layer will now have to perform the SSE coding, which they haven't really had to do before. However, we will have to start using SSE at some point. So we feel like this is a very minimal entry into the world of SSE for the ELs, because in the absolute worst case where no suitable library is available, you could always, because these objects are purely fixed size, they could just be decoded like by hand, basically. Like it doesn't require, like if there's no library available that you can trust, then you could probably just wing it and implement it like in a different way, and it wouldn't be too much code either. I guess it would be about the same as just using JSON. So that's why I think we were making this proposal, and this was specifically me and Peter Shilagi, who's not here today. We're thinking like, why don't we just start with this, because we got to add the SSE at some point anyways. And we just wanted to hear, like, what do other people think about it, or is it a bad idea, or...
Thank you. Yeah, Mikhail?
Yeah, one potential issue is not only the SSE support on EL, but also SSE union support by all SSE libraries. I'm not sure the union is not used anywhere else at this moment, so that might be an issue as well. We need union because for different requests we have these type fields, and we need to decode them differently. They have different fields.
Yeah, I understand this, but at the same time, I think it is a pretty, again, we also talked about this union problem. However, in the end, this is such a simple, these types are so simple that it makes sense to start with this. I mean, we were discussing adding like encoding transactions as SSE at some point, and we've also been discussing just generally converting the whole engine API over to SSE at some point. But for now, just as a sort of minimal starting point, we could just like try to get this in and then just see how it feels, prep like the libraries and stuff to make it work. And then, yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to hear it from maybe the clients as well. Anyone has an opinion about it?
This is maybe a dumb question, but I assume given that 6110 is on the devnets, everyone's already implemented it with JSON, right? Like there's no team who hasn't done it with JSON, correct?
No, it's already implemented.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's more like also a cleanliness question. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, on both sides of the API, we have to deal with these objects in JSON, which are not really,
Right.
I mean, they are just internal objects.
So I guess my proposal, if no one feels like strongly about it, is I would maybe keep it as JSON for now, at least like for the next couple devnets, because we still have like some pretty big things we have not tested yet. And then, I don't know, it feels like something we can also choose to add basically like later on if we want to do it. But yeah, given we're still working on 7702, we're still working on EOF, my sense is Teams bandwidth is probably limited to like take on another piece of work. And if we can effectively just add it later on, yeah, I don't know. I personally feel more comfortable seeing the rest of Pectra like a bit
Yeah, it's
more
fine.
solid.
I mean, like I said, if it's not, I just wanted to hear. I mean, we can totally live with it being JSON for now. For the future, we definitely have this plan to work on converting the whole engine API to SSE. So sooner or later, and at that point, we will redesign maybe some of the functions to have a slightly different structure or something. And then, so I guess maybe we will get another chance then to like really clean this up. We just felt like it would make our life simpler anyways. But it's fine.
Okay. Anyone else have thoughts or answers on this? Okay, yeah, and then there's a good comment by Bezu that they just haven't had time to evaluate it, so we could decide this in the future, all core devs.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
yeah,
It was really quick, yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought.
Yeah, so okay,
Thanks.
so let's review it async, and then we can decide this if on the next call or the call after that. Like it doesn't seem super urgent, but if it's something that yeah we want to do, we can we can do it later in the fork process. Okay, anything else on SSE? Okay. Then next up, there was a proposal by Michael on the Lighthouse team for get Blobs V1. I believe he's not on the call, unfortunately. So I don't know if anyone else has the context around this or is able to talk about it. I see, I guess, Mikhail, you approved it about a month ago, so I don't know if there was anything else we were waiting on or any feedback we wanted specifically by before merging this.
Yeah, the change looks good in terms of the spec. It's just, adoption and consensus of core devs is needed to move forward. I think it's pretty good optimization. We have discussed some caveats, some potential issues with Michael's Pro about using this optimization in the sense when it can hinder, blob propagation. So but I think it's viable optimization. Used carefully should be quite helpful.
Thanks. Enrico?
Yeah, I just want to say that we like that, and we will probably use this optimization because we tend to try to get from peers pretty soon blobs that we missed or we are receiving late. So it would be very nice if we can try first on our local EL to get those before trying to get it from the peers, and will be nice thing for us. But I also think that this should not be abused from the CL side. I was thinking lately, because if CL pretends to get it a lot of those blobs from the EL, and I see like we should not do something like that affects the dissemination on the P2P, like a super optimized way of trying to get it, and response. I don't want to all the messages that I receive, because you are not actively participating on the P2P anymore if you abuse that channel.
Thanks. Is there a way we can like add a limit or like I guess not really, right? Like
I think like we should add some more clean usage context. Let's say the honest validator should use this in such cases, but not maybe in others.
I see. POTUS?
So what is the problem? The problem is that you're not going to be gossiping those blobs, but can you just get it from the L? If you have it, you consider the GA already satisfied, and you gossip them anyways on the P2P side?
Image that you receive a block first, and the blobs come after, so you know in advance a way to look up your local EL for all the blobs, and then you construct an I don't want message over the P2P, because you say I already have those, so don't even send to me. And it means that you're not even disseminating anything. So you're not participating in the dissemination of the blobs.
But can you just send the I have messages and just gossip them anyways because you have them?
Yeah, I mean, if you do that, it's okay, but it should be in the honest behavior of the validator. You say, if I get it from the EL, I disseminate and then send the I don't want. If you send only the I don't want, I'm cheating, essentially.
I think, yeah, that seems reasonable. I guess the weird thing is we'd need to open a PR in the CL specs that effectively mentions that, correct?
Yeah, it can be done on the honest validator guide or on the P2P network, perhaps.
Got it. Mikhail?
I just wanted to add that disregarding, yeah, we need CL to use it first, so it makes sense to implement this method, but EL devs should implement this. So where's also check temperature on this, whether it's easy or not, and how much of the efforts it requires to get implemented on EL side. Probably not that much.
Anyone on the EL side have thoughts on this? Okay, I guess if there's not a ton of feedback now, what I would maybe do is, I don't know, Enrico, if you'd be able to open a PR against the specs, like the honest validator specs, to kind of describe the gossiping behavior. If we can have that PR open by like early next week, we can bring it up on the call, on the CL call next week, and then if people are happy with that PR, then we can merge both the specs PR and the engine API one. And if there's any objections on the EL side with regards to complexity, we can also, have last week be like the final place to have next week be the last place to raise them. Yeah.
I can open the PR, but I will be off from next week, so maybe it will be carry on by someone else.
Okay, great. Yeah, if you have the time to do it before you leave, that'd be valuable. And so yeah, let's try and get this resolved in the next week or so, and then worst case, make a final decision on the CL call. Anything else on this? Okay. Thanks a lot, everyone, for the context. So that's everything we had around Pectra. Anything else people wanted to discuss about the current devnets, current forks? Okay, and then I guess one thing we can also decide next week is, assuming we did merge this engine API change, do we want this to be part of Devnet 3? For now, we'll keep Devnet 3 as Devnet 2 and the change on 7702. Sweet. I guess, moving on, next thing on the agenda, so I always forget the number, 7212, the R1 precompile. We discussed it a few times already. There's some desire, I think, by some of the teams to bring it into L1 in large part because it's already implemented on L2s. At the same time, Pectra is already huge in scope. We don't have it implemented. There is some concerns around the complexity of different EIPs being tested together. So I guess, the people think we should be including this. Is now the right time to make a final call on this? Do people want to see how Pectra goes and then potentially push this back a bit more? I know we've pushed it back over and over again, but we're also in a spot where we don't have all of Pectra implemented, and so we're not necessarily waiting to implement stuff. I guess Ansgar is in favor. There's another one in favor. Client.
Yeah, I kind of would like to see how Pectra plays out over the next couple months. I feel like we're in the process of restarting devnets. The things that have been accepted into Pectra aren't in the devnets fully yet. It feels a little bit like, 712. 7212 is very easy to do, but we're not on top of Pectra right now. And it doesn't feel like the time right now is a good time to be adding additional stuff onto it, regardless of the simplicity. So I would rather make that call in 3 months. If Pectra is going great and it's easy to add, great. But if not, then we haven't added more stress to our testing load, which is already being pushed to the limits.
Okay. Besu seems okay waiting as well. Perry's highlighting we have 20 EIPs. I guess, does anyone feel strongly that we should add this, now? Otherwise, yeah, I am inclined to agree. I guess, I don't know, Ansgar, do you want to explain why you think we should make a decision now? I'm kind of inclined to agree that we can wait 3 months with this and it doesn't really change anything. But is there a reason why there's like some urgency?
So, I mean, I think in general, I just think it's valuable to make the decision as early as possible because there's a bunch of things that depend on it. Specifically with this, there's a lot of tooling, a lot of like wallet developers and whatnot that I think would really appreciate knowing as early as possible, at least that that there's some sort of preliminary decision towards yes, and then even if we can still walk that back, but at least that they have some signaling that they can rely on.
Isn't the
And also,
EIP
I mean,
on L2s though? Like for
yes, but
tooling and
I still
wallets, did they? Yeah.
more like in terms of strategy of like do you forever basically have to maintain two separate like the chains that do support and the chains that don't, or I mean I don't have a strong preference if people really want to keep it out for now and then make the decision later. It just feels to me unrealistic that 3 months from now we'll add any EIP in, and so I would just make the decision now to like add it in at least on a preliminary basis, and then just look at a later point which Devnet it would be a good fit for bringing it into the process formally. But I'm happy to be overruled. I don't feel strongly about it.
Anyone else have strong opinion?
Yeah, I think I'm slightly in favor of including it.
And I guess, yeah, maybe on the client implementation side, like, do all the teams already have this done? I guess, yeah, does any team not have an implementation of this already, or does everyone have it done? Okay, so Beiju has like an open pull request. On the EIP RIP process, Ansgar, what I know, yeah, there's some stuff in the doc, yeah, that Ula shared, but like, can you give a quick summary of what the like core things are?
Yeah, and I'm also happy if Ulrich maybe wants to explain a little bit. In my mind, it's several things. So for one, it's just like more procedural questions. So like, what do we do about numbering? Do we basically create a new EIP, copy over the specs? How do we basically reference the kind of the status between the two? But then also in terms of actually just making decisions, do we ship it at the same address? So that is within the layer 2 precompile range, or do we move it over to the L1 precompile range on L1? How important is it that basically dApps can just use them as is across the different layers? Do we want to make small changes to the spec, or are we okay with using the absolutely identical spec? Like, I think those are questions. They're not like terribly like hard to figure out, but I would just hate to have to do them on a rushed call 3 months from now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think Daniel has a good question around reference tests. Does anyone know? Like, it does feel like we are bottlenecked on L1 by testing, because there's just so much stuff already. So like, is this in a spot where if we include it, like the testing work is already done, or like, would we expect there to be some fair amount of testing? Because I think that's probably one of the things as well that should play, like, do we include it now versus 3 months from now? Like, if there's a bunch of testing work, yeah, it feels kind of unreasonable to add more now. But if the testing coverage is pretty much complete, that yeah, I think that's interesting. Okay, Julius, do you have a link to the testing coverage? But yeah, and I guess. Oh yeah, Mario.
Yeah, even if it's already covered, I don't think it's gonna be so easy just to merge it into the L1 tests. There's still going to be, we're still going to have to review this, and eventually merge it. Yes, but it's not free. Is what I mean.
And the tests, and the tests that Ulyss just shared are like get tests. They're not like specs tests.
Yeah. So no. Yeah. So so the process would be that we have to review them, then convert them, then merge them to L1 tests. So it's not free. It's definitely not free. Yeah. It's definitely extra work.
So I don't know. I think given that, I'd probably lean fairly heavily against including it now. I think if the 7212 folks want to continue pushing for it, like it seems like there's support, but having like proper like L1 level test coverage, I think
what I would suggest is that to help push this on the testing side is just start converting. If someone that is championing this EIP could help port these tests into the execution spec test repository, that would be a very good help. And that can be done in parallel, because right now the testing team is focusing on Bragg accepted EIPs. So if someone that is championing this EIP could help us out to port those tests, that would be, I think that will help the EIP to get into Bragg.
Thanks.
Yeah, I guess me and my team can help lots.
Yeah, and I think Mario, do you want to just share the two repos? But basically, we can kind of show you where we'd need to get the cross-client testing and what it would look like. And I assume something we'd want to do as well for this precompile is like pretty extensive fuzzing of the implementations against each other, like we tend to do for other precompiles. I don't know if there's been any work done there as well. I guess I assume not, but I think if we want to add this on top of the already sort of really, really huge fork that we have, effectively having having very thorough test coverage coming from the champions of the EIP, I think is what we'll need. There's also some comments in the chat, Tony, around concerns about the quote unquote government curve. I don't think like most client teams have like raised it, but do you want to just maybe give a quick overview so that everyone has the context?
Yeah, I can do that. I hope you can hear me well enough. So I'm basically against the EIP just because Sector 56K1 was initially chosen for certain reasons, and R1 is different when it comes to the parameters of the curve. And also the kind of a second reason would be that this is kind of a perfect example what we can ship on L2, and in my opinion not needed for L1.
Thanks. I don't know if there's any comments or thoughts about that. Okay, then I guess, on the testing front, it probably makes sense for the 7212 champions to kind of get it into a spot where it wouldn't be kind of an additional burden on the testing team. It's still CFI, so we can reconsider it like in a few months when we've done a bit more progress on Pectra. But it seems like the main objection from the client team side is really just, or the main objection, I guess, from including it is do we actually have the bandwidth to test this properly? So to the extent that you can help with that, Ulyss and your team, then I think it might make it more likely it will make it more likely for it to be included in Pectra. But I think not making a decision today is probably the right call given how early we are. Anything else? I don't know, Ansgar, like client, both your hands are up, but are they still up from last time? Ansgar's gone, then like client, if you have final comment, you can say it now. Okay, I'll just assume your hand is still up. Okay, sweet. So next up, Andrew, you wanted to chat about quantum resistance. So do you want to give a bit of context there? And I think it's worth breaking this into two different topics. So first, just the risks and concerns around quantum, and then second, if that has implications on Verkle and what they are. But yeah, Andrew.
Right. So it's like what Vitalik highlighted at ECC, that a lot of experts forecast that in the 2030s, quantum computers will become powerful enough to break non-trivial cryptography. So, I mean, it's difficult to forecast, especially the future, but assuming that there is a good chance of that happening, so we are essentially, with Verkle being quantum resistant, we are not being quantum resistant. We are replacing the commitment scheme in Ethereum with the current commitment scheme, which is the Merkle-Patricia Tri, with something that is potentially vulnerable. So, two questions. If I am no expert on quantum computers and cryptography, so it's a genuine question. Like that vulnerability of Verkle to quantum computers, is this like super theoretical? And yeah, so it's something that we can like sleep well and not worry too much, or is it a very real thing? That's one question. And assuming that it is real, then maybe we should actually change the cryptography in Verkle to something quantum resistant, because I imagine that, well, so the cryptography will have to change, of course, but things like maybe the key embedding scheme and the migration strategies, a lot of work there can be reused, so it will not be like a total waste. So yeah, we'll have something like, so yeah, and assuming that this vulnerability of Verkle is real, then we perhaps should move to something like Verkle, quantum resistant Verkle, rather than, because it will be a massive change for not only for the protocol, but like for the clients, but for the entire ecosystem. And if we are asking for this bigger change, we shouldn't ask for another massive change in 5 years. Yeah, that's my. I just want us to start thinking strategically about it.
Thanks for the context. And Sudeep shared the talking question in the chat as well for reference for people. Felix, you had your hand up.
So basically, one thing to understand is, from what I understand about it, the Verkle implementation is very vulnerable to quantum computing should it come to pass, because it's like 100% based on the elliptic curve cryptography. However, currently Ethereum is generally reliant on elliptic curve cryptography, and it's built into the protocol at a very low level. So basically, it is, if an exploit, like if a quantum computer comes to pass which is capable of breaking this cryptography, then we are screwed generally, because I mean, in the future there are these long-term plans to introduce full account abstraction, but until this is done, we are going to be vulnerable to these types of things, and we are very, very far away from implementing full account abstraction, I think.
Thanks.
So this is just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, Ignacio?
Yeah, so just to add on what Felix said, I want to also remind that on like 3 months ago we included blobs in the protocol, and blobs use KZG commitments, which also use elliptic curves. So as far as I know, the strategy there was considering in the future changing KZG commitments to Starks to make the blobs be quantum resistant. So yeah, I just want to make the point that unless something really relevant changed in the last 3 months regarding a real risk of quantum computers being real, I think maybe the overall sentiment around this risk shouldn't change. But what I know is that Josh has started talking with the research team in the EF, so they can start talking with like experts in the field, so we can get a more updated, I wouldn't call it forecast, but sentiment around this risk, which usually like people always think is 10 years away, but at some point that will be actually true, and we should have a more like overall plan on this topic, not only for Verkle, but as said before, for a lot of other things, for blobs, for signatures, for having account abstraction or things like that. So yeah, just that.
Thanks. Guillaume?
Yeah, just wanted to try to answer all the questions by Andrew in order. So one of them is, can we rescue Verkle? Not really, because yes, like others said, it's based on elliptic curves, and in fact, it gets a lot of properties from its elliptic curves. Unfortunately, elliptic curves all that cryptography relies on the Diffie-Hellman assumption, which is broken in by quantum algorithm, namely some form of the Shor algorithm. So if quantum computers become a reality, which is still a big if, even in the 30s, it would break Verkle and, like Ignacio and Felix pointed out, other areas of Ethereum that are probably just as important as the state. It's not the state is big, but yeah, there's a lot of security assumptions in Ethereum that are beyond the state that also rely on that. One thing I wanted to add is, or at least to dispute, is the idea that if we switch directly to quantum resistant feature, well, first we lose a lot of the features of that Verkle was created. Like there's a lot of things like smaller proofs. This is something you will lose. Homomorphism, things like this, that are extremely useful for building, for stemming state growth and doing other things. But what I'm getting at is, if we go straight to the final product, it assumes we know what the final product is, and that's a really tall order. Because, for example, we expect to use binary trees for Starks, but the Stark, like the concept of Stark, the security of Starks is mostly conjectured. So in a 15 years frame, let's say quantum computers happen mid-30s, we might discover something that is going to break Starks or even some hash function we use. So I think it's a bit optimistic to say we should go straight to the last tree model, because we don't know what the tree model is. We will have to upgrade the tree no matter what. This is not the last time we upgrade the tree. And the advantage of Verkle is that we are currently developing all the techniques to update the tree, which can be reused later on. So I don't think, if we go to Verkle now, or let's say in 2 years, and we find in 10 years that quantum computers are approaching fast, which is, I mean, I haven't really heard any experts say that. I hear a lot of stuff on the news, but I don't see any actual progress. We still don't have big registers, like big enough registers that this would be a quantum registers that would be a danger. But even if it happens, we'll be able to react because we'll have all the tools already. So I'm not worried about having to change in a rush. Well, in a relative rush. Of course, if it happens from one day to the next, we'll be taken by surprise. But if it's like a 2-year process, we'll be ready to do this. And on top of that, there's no guarantee that. I mean, yeah, it's a bit naive to expect that we will never upgrade the tree ever again. It will happen. The MPT tree, it was created in 2013, 2014. Since I joined the EF, people have been talking about replacing the tree. So there's nothing guaranteed. Like there's definitely no guarantee that we will never have to replace the tree, whatever it is. So that doesn't mean we want to ignore everything that is like. That doesn't mean we want to ignore quantum resistance. We should have this conversation, but I think we should separate it from the question of Verkle. It should really be: is Ethereum quantum resistant? Is the internet quantum resistant? And then not make that a showstopper for Verkle.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess I agree. Yeah, so I agree that separating out the quantum risk broadly from like Verkle and possible Verkle alternatives is probably the best way to think about this. And there's a lot of different ways in which quantum computers could affect Ethereum and more things much beyond that. So I guess what's the right place for people to discuss this? Like, we're not going to figure out Ethereum's quantum strategy in the next 35 minutes. Is there some place that people are discussing this, or people would want to discuss this, or some concrete thing people would want to see happen?
I was hoping for Josh to answer that, but if he's not around, oh yeah, Josh is here. Do you want to?
Yes, so I'm creating a group where we can continue discussions around this. If anyone would like to join, I guess I'll drop a link in the Discord.
Should we create just a Discord channel for quantum resistance?
Can also do that, yeah.
Yeah. Do we have actually? So we have a cryptography Discord channel. Does it make sense? And it's not. I don't know. It gets a couple messages every now and then, but like, does it make sense to use that and then just direct people there? And I see Vitalik is among the frequent posters, so if we want to like ask him for more context on the talk, it might be a good place to have that.
Yeah, that sounds good. We can continue the conversation there.
Cool. Okay, so let's do the cryptography Discord, and continue there. And I think trying to figure out specifically what the estimates are based on, and then what what the actual risks are.
If I may add something regarding the design itself, it's also been built in a way that we can swap last minute a Verkle tree with a binary tree. But yeah, like I said, we would lose something, but it's still an option. So we can take our time to study the thing and make a decision when, first we identify that the danger is present, and that we have the response to that danger.
Thanks. And I guess that is. So there's a couple comments in the chat as well. Like this is kind of the second thread is, given this and potentially other things like different, developments on different type of trees and whatnot, what's the best place to discuss whether Verkle is the right next thing? So we have sort of scheduled it for the next fork already. We decided this, I think early this year, because we wanted to make sure we would keep it as a priority. I know there's the Verkle implementers calls, but obviously those are kind of focused on, actually working on the Verkle implementations. But are those the best place for people to come and discuss, potential alternatives to Verkle? Should we should we do this here? And if so, what are like the factors we want to consider?
Yeah, so to be clear, there is no alternative to Verkle currently. There's a couple ideas that maybe in 3 years will be a correct, like an acceptable competitor to Verkle. But if you want to discuss those ideas, yeah, we are happy to discuss that on the Verkle's implementer call. Just because, yeah, if those ideas are relevant, we want to hear and discuss them.
Okay. Anyone else have thoughts on this? Okay, so if people have, alternatives for Verkle, we can we can we can discuss them on the Verkle call, and then obviously yes, like once we ship Pectra, we should make sure that Verkle is still the right thing for the fork after. But I think that will be late in if what we want is to ship a state try transition and use a different approach to the Verkle. So like if we arrived after Pectra and we said, there's this other completely different urgent thing to ship and maybe it's more urgent than Verkle, that seems reasonable that we could make that decision. But if we arrive to Osaka and, we think like Verkle is the thing we still think we should ship, but it might be worth exploring another type of tree. That feels like the type of thing we'd want to start doing now, so that by the time we get to Osaka, we actually understand what the trade-offs are very deeply. So if people do have like candidate alternatives, yeah, I think it'd be worth looking into it now, and we can discuss those on the Verkle calls. Potis?
Can we phrase the commitment of the form by Osaka we're changing the tree? And if there's any alternative to Verkle that wants it to make it to Osaka, then it should be at a level that we feel confident as we feel today about Verkle being in Osaka. So this might sound impossible, but what would be a tragedy would be to delay changing the tree because of some statements about being in early research at the time. So we should probably commit to changing the tree in Osaka, with the candidate today being Verkle.
Ansgar, do you want to expand why you don't think it's a reasonable commitment?
Yeah, I think basically making that commitment would very severely restrict the design space. It basically only realistically would allow for Verkle and maybe 1 or 2 potential alternatives. I think what very realistically could happen is that we basically agree that, hey, given these advantages in decay or something, we think that Verkle already has these downsides that we don't like, and that within the next 3 years or so, we will be at a point where we will have vastly superior alternatives, and we will not make 2 upgrades, so we would rather wait for a few more years. I think, I'm definitely not confident that that's where this conversation will end up in, but I think it should definitely be a option. That should be one outcome that we might land on. And so I think making this commitment now seems arbitrary, and no, I don't see a strong reason for it.
Okay, I guess, Josh, when is the next Verkle implementer call?
So we had one this week. The next one is in not this upcoming Monday, but the following Monday.
Okay, so I guess, yeah, it might...
Every 2 weeks.
Yeah. I think, yeah, it probably makes sense to discuss, specific alternatives there. I don't know if anyone wants to do this in the next 2 weeks. It doesn't feel like the most super urgent thing, but yeah, it would be good to not wait, 6 months to do this if we think there are other options. But yeah, I agree that like having the discussion there and like people having time to prep and like actually read up on things is the most valuable way to approach this rather than trying to like come up with alternatives right now on the spot. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, moving this to the Verkle calls, and then if, I don't know, nothing has happened in like 3-4 months, 3-4 months, we can follow up on it here again. And yeah, maybe one last question. So like, what's the urgency to changing the tree in the next 24 months? I know we talked about this a few months ago around the state size growth, but I don't know if Guillaume or Josh, you have a quick answer to that.
I mean, yeah, it's a state-side growth. It's also unlocking a lot of things with statelessness, including smaller proofs to do many communication, like improve the way we communicate. For example, between shards. Sorry, roll-ups if they choose to adopt. There's a lot of features we want to have, and yeah, it's also like you said initially, it's mostly a state growth thing.
Got it. Thanks. Anything else on Verkle or Quantum? Otherwise, next steps are the cryptography channel for Quantum and then add a Verkle implementers call for Verkle. Okay. Next up then, we had an EIP by a few different authors, Guillaume and Wei, leaf level state expiry. I'll post the, I guess, the draft EIP, but yeah, Guillaume, you want to give some overview?
I think I can take this.
Oh, yeah, wait, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So just gonna do that. And I've also put the link to the EIP in the chat. So I'm just gonna spend like 10 minutes going through this EIP. So please bear with me, everyone. So thanks for having me here. I'm going to introduce this EIP called 7736, leaf level state expiry. It's written by Guillaume and I. So the goal here is to get some feedbacks on this EIP and at the same time to reintroduce the concept of state expiry to everyone, because the progress on state expiry has been stagnant in the past few years due to different complications and research paths. So we not only want to make this EIP work, but we also want to spark discussion on the concept of state expiry, how we can integrate different ideas into the protocol. Yeah, so without further ado, let's get right into it. So the motivation for this EIP, as I said, the previous state expiry solutions are very complicated and complex to implement, and they usually require heavy changes in the Ethereum structure, i.e. Address space extension. So because they are so complicated, people are not motivated to proceed with the research. So hence we came up with this EIP 7736, which is a much simpler approach to state expiry, and it's also backward compatible with Verkle 3. So this EIP is a state expiry solution that can be enabled after Verkle 3 is implemented. Yeah. Let's talk about specifications and the specific details on how this EIP work. I'm just going to talk briefly on the constants that we introduced in this EIP, but I want to highlight on 3 particular constants here. We are going to introduce a new concept or a new domain or a new field, whatever you want to call it, called epoch, but this epoch is not the epoch that we know in the current protocol. Well, you can think of it as an expiry epoch. So you have like epoch length, which is the duration of the epoch. Here we denote it as 6 months. Then you have the initial epoch counter, which basically the initial epoch when we implement or execute this EIP. Then we have non-active epochs, which is the number of concurrent unexpired epochs, which is in which the default value is 2. So if you combine this information together, you can just think of it as these values denotes when a state is considered as active or not. We'll look into it in the next few slides. So changes to the Verkle tree. So the current Verkle tree structure is like internal nodes, you have internal nodes, you have extension nodes, and you also have leaf node. After this EIP is implemented, we are going to make a change to the extension node, in which we'll add a last epoch field or variable to the extension node. Right. So this additional field is going to denote if a set of value is considered as expired or not. And the exact expiry rule, which I'm going to show here, is as follows. Right. So for every write event, the last epoch field is going to be updated with the value of the current global epoch that we have. The epoch here, again, I'm referring to the expiry epoch. And for any read or write events, if the current epoch, the current global epoch is greater than or equals to the last epoch plus the non-active epochs, then is this particular event or this particular operation is reverted because the set of values or this particular extension node is deemed as expired, right? So this is the expiry logic that we have. In regards to the how client teams want to do the expiry logic, like prune away the expired nodes, it can be implemented themselves, like whichever logic you guys prefer. But minimally for each extension node, data that needs to be kept are the stem value of the leaf node. For the extension node, this needs to be kept because we need to find the location of the extension node, and we also need to keep the commitment of the expired extension node, which is used for validation when we do resurrection. So talking about resurrection of the extension node, we will need to introduce a new transaction type called resurrect TX type, which essentially contains the encoded form of a vector, which contains the stem, the last epoch, and the values, right? So this three simple field. We are also going to introduce a new form of cost, which is based on resurrection gas cost, based on the constants introduced in EIP 4672. The brief logic of how this works is that you send a user send a transaction, then we want to resurrect a certain state. We are going to charge the gas cost. After the gas cost is charged, we proceed with the validation, and the validation process is on a high level is something like to just reconstruct the extension node, and from there you can validate against the one that is in the database, and you can do a comparison between the commitment to check if they are valid or not. Right. So why or rationale of this EIP? So again, no ESC is required. It's simple. It only references the Verkle tree that we have right now, except for the additional field that we add to the extension node. And we don't have to introduce like multiple per epoch trees as compared to the previous state expiry solutions. We are going to have like smaller resurrection proofs because we just need to provide the necessary data through the transaction. The gas cost for the resurrection is clear, and overall we only need to expire the cold data, the hot data, or the active data will still remain in the state. It's forward compatible, so in the future, if you want to do like ESE or multiple epoch trees, it's still possible. Right. And some questions that we have while writing this proposal, most important question, how effective is the expiry? So it's a simple approach, but we expect that most but not all data are deleted. We still have to do the simulation to check against the corner cases. So we need to post the statistics when we have done that. And the second question, kind of also the important one, is why only write events, update the last epoch counter? Because if you think about, if we include read events as well, it will refresh the last epoch in the extension node, then essentially it's considered as a write event because you have to recalculate the commitment of the extension node, then you have to update your database. So it's potentially adds a DOS vector. So some potential solutions that we have is to increase the read event for the initial epoch read to match that of a write event, but we are still exploring other solutions as well. So feel free to give your opinions. Yeah, that's it for my introduction of this EIP. Again, I'll welcome everyone to go to the discussion page to give your opinions and feedbacks on this EIP, and hope to spark some more discussions on the expiry as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. Yeah, if you can share the slides either here or on the agenda, that would be great. I had a question, and then there's another one about client, but basically this is clearly more efficient on like flatter trees, but is there aside from like the efficiency gain, is there any other like reason why this has to be closely coupled with Verkle? Like if we switch to like some other type of tree in the future, or if we did it on the Merkle Patricia tree, would it still work but just be sort of less efficient, or are there some other like dependencies or type coupling with Verkle?
Yeah, understood. So I think the nice thing about Verkle tree that led us to this proposal is that in Verkle tree, the values are like sort of like you can think of it as group under an extension node. So when they are grouped, we can expire all of them at once if all of them are not being accessed together, right? So if you compare that to like, for example, MPT, it's not the case. So it's harder to do that on MPT currently, based on what I know. For other types of tree, it depends on what kind of data structure that you're referring to. But if you have the sort of a feature of like grouping elements together, then maybe a similar proposal would work. If not, then I think we have to consider other alternatives. Yeah, so that's my take on that.
Awesome, thanks. Then there was a question by Light Client asking, does this stop the state from growing, or does it just means it keeps growing but slower forever?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So definitely we are not bounding the state completely. Definitely the state is going to grow slower, but at what rate it's going to grow at, and how efficient it is, again, at expiring the values, we still have to do a simulation on against the entire state that we have and do the expiration and get the statistics. So I don't have the exact answer for that. We have to do more analysis on that. Yeah.
Thanks.
If I may add something, yes, like it's not necessarily tied to Verkle trees, but it's really especially interesting with Verkle trees because the Verkle tree is very shallow and has very extensive nodes. The nodes are very large, but their storage on disk is very small. So while you're not bounding the disk, while you're not bounding the size on disk, you only retain long term the smallest part of the tree. Like the structure that remains on disk long term is much smaller than it would be in an MPT.
Got it. Thank you. And then there's a last question by Lukesh asking, would client teams be expected to prune expired nodes in the background?
Yeah, I think that's a logic that you guys determine. It really depends. Like some client teams, you can choose not to prune it at all, right? So it really depends on the implementation.
Got it. Thanks. Any other questions, comments? Oh, yeah. Daniel?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that the EIP from a technical point of view, I think is very good. For me, it's just really the questions. I mean, every sort of state expiry comes potentially with very bad UX, because I think it's very hard for users to understand that whatever state they have disappears after some time if they do not write it in the last year, something like this. So, I mean, for me, it's more the question if we really want to do that in the first place.
I guess this is more dev UX than user UX thing in a way, right? Like, because as a user, you would expect that your wallet would sort of handle this for you, right? Like you tell them you want to interact with this contract, make this transaction, and then the wallet will have to figure out like, what is it?
Yeah, but I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, but there are some cases, people are losing their phones with the wallets, or I don't know, they just uninstall their old wallets and reinstall a new one, and it might not have all the data for the resurrection. So I mean, it's not impossible that there would be users who cannot resurrect the state anymore. The only thing would be if there's like a third party where you can go to, like,
right.
archive notes or something like this.
Yeah, and I think that's always been the assumption that like either you can restore, you can save, your like copies of the state, or you rely on some third party to give you a proof. And then this is like many years ago. The other idea that we had was like state rent, where you can think of you can think of like state expiry as like an out of protocol market for the state, where either you manage it yourself or you pay some third party, and state rent is effectively an in protocol market for the state, where you could pay Ethereum to keep it for you forever. But I think like we would need to discuss this, but I don't think there's a way to resolve that. It's kind of like the core trade-off. Yeah. Any other comments or thoughts? Okay, Ansgar has some comments around just understanding the density of the nodes, which might be worth looking into. So there's the discussion thread on It's Magician. Is that the main way for people to continue the conversation and like reach out to you?
Yeah, I think just go into the discussion link. We can continue our discussions there. Yeah.
Maybe I missed this, but was this something that needs to really go in with Verkle from the beginning, or was the expectation that this would be something that is added in at a later point?
No, we can do both, right? If we choose that, if we think that this EIP is good to go with Verkle directly, then we can do that, or we can do that. We can decide when we want to enable this EIP after Verkle is implemented. Yeah, so that's one of the good things as well about this EIP.
What do you mean by the latter? Like we can just decide to enable it at a later point? Like we have the similar situation with the MPT. We could decide to change it or to change the format of the account header, but we don't ever end up doing it because this is a complicated piece of code and we're afraid to change it. So is there something about Verkle that makes it different in that sense?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think this is mentioned in the EIP as well, under the backward compatibility section. So it's backward compatible with Verkle because in the default value for the fourth evaluation point, if you check the extension node structure, it is 0, it's default to 0. So even if we add this new EIP, this new counter field to the extension node, when we recalculate the commitment, it's still going to be the same, and hence it's backward compatible. Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, just to chime in, like Hans said, it's been built to be very backwards compatible because the value is 0. All you need to do next time when you activate the EIP is to add the timestamp on every write, and then the older tree values, the values that were not written since the fork, are automatically seen as old. But we will definitely not do this during the Verkle fork because the Verkle fork is complex enough. So that would come in a later fork.
Thanks. Lucas?
So my 2 cents here is that if the portal network devs manage to start the state network before we go to Verkle trees, and I supposedly heard that they planned to start in like alpha or beta stage this year. Well, then I'm all for this kind of expiration and pruning because there would be a good decentralized way to resurrect that, for example, the wallets or anyone could integrate to. So just my 2 cents here. Would be good to catch up with them. How are they going? How is it going for them with the state network?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Okay, anything else on this EIP? And okay, if not, last thing I had on the agenda, so I know we've wanted to prioritize EIP 4.4s more. Anyone have updates on this?
Yeah, there was just one tiny update. I had made an ETH research post on using torrents for EIP 4.4s, and there was a request to add the proofs in the torrents. So I've done that and published a new torrent file. So in case someone wants to, I guess, download it or use it, make sure you use the latest version of the torrent.
Thanks. Can you share the post?
Yeah.
Sweet. Anything else? Okay, then otherwise we can wrap up here. Yeah, thanks everyone. We'll talk to you all on the CL call next week.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Everyone.
Bye.